Assalamu alaikum. We're now busy with part 17, and we are actually at the point of the Simonstown Muslim community. And I was there last week. They started now a Saturday market and to finance or to assist with the finance of the Muslim museum that they've got there in the Amle house. Very interesting. So let's read it. Simonstown in 1920, the Anglican Church Mission School, St. Francis, claimed that there was no accommodation for the expelled Muslim children. The Imam and the congregation felt that the Muslims of Simonstown should establish their own school attached to the mosque. On the 9th of July, 1923, interested members of the Simonstown Muslim community unanimously elected Mr. H.B. Manuel as the first manager of the school, and the education department was advised accordingly. The Simonstown people made an appeal for state aid for the school. On the 18th of September 1923, the acting superintendent general of the education positively responded. This was a feat for the Simonstown community because for the first time a primary school was part of a mosque. That's very interesting. F number 4472, and thus never removed from the mosque trusteeship. The trust deed also stipulated an ethnic duality. Mosque Nurul Islam and all other, quote, Mosque Nurul Islam, this is of Simonstown, and all other property belonging to the said community shall be held by and shall be vested in 9 trustees, all members of the Muslim congregation, and 3 of whom shall be Indian or Indian descent. August 1911, meeting minutes. On the advice of a white friend of Dr. Abdurrahman, William Ransomon, the congregation was advised not to take a bond out on the mosque property. That's interesting. The mosque, the non-Muslim advised the Muslims not to take out the bond. Okay, this is interesting. Okay, well, the Quran speaks about the fact that there are people of the book that are truly believers in Allah, but there are only a few, Allah says. And Allah explains them, those people of the book. And it's not like we can say all Jews and Christians is like we say would actually, but the people of the book, which we term Christians and Jews, okay, the people of the book, they make sujood for Allah in the middle of the night. They participated in jihad. They gave zakah, they gave sadaqah, they gave the jizya, whatever they needed to do. And they prayed in the middle of the night. They make sujood for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And they fear Allah. So there's this people of the book that Allah speak about that are sincere believers, and Allah promises them 2 rewards. In other words, they follow Nabi Isa and they follow Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so there's 2 rewards for them. This is excellent. People don't know about that in the Quran. And here you get one particular non-Muslim, white person, telling Muslims not to take out a bond on the mosque property. Okay. And to raise their own funds and not to seek aid from outside of Simonstown. This advice saw the Simonstown community become autonomous within 2 years, and from their own resources and with voluntary labor. Again, 2 classrooms were added to the mosque building. The first principal of the Simonstown Mosque School was Mr. Salih Burdin, who held a T3 teaching qualification, and he was a staff member of the Rahmania Institute, of which Dr. Abdurrahman was the manager. Mr. Manuel, the Simonstown Muslim Primary School manager and associate of Dr. Abdurrahman, along with Mr. Burdin, appointed Mrs. Basson, a white local lady, as the assistant teacher in charge of the academic subjects. Now you can see, for instance, they didn't allow Muslims or non-whites to become teachers and doctors, etc. So that the white fraternity will maintain the upper positions, because there isn't other people, Muslims, or there are other non-whites that can take those positions. So then forces the disenfranchised people to take the franchised people in order, because of the experience, to put them into position. So they actually, in that way, secure the top positions for the small white preferential community. It's a strategic move, but I mean, it's not acceptable. But I mean, just to think that people could actually do that, and as I say, the shaitan is unique. The shaitan has ways of dealing with. He uses anybody to assist him. May Allah protect us from his influence, inshallah. Okay, Dr. Abdullah, along with Mr. Burdin, appointed Mrs. Basson, a white local lady, as the assistant teacher in charge of the academic subjects. There were no Muslim female teachers available locally at that time. A teacher for religious studies was also appointed, but the Department of Education was not prepared to subsidize his salary, as it was prepared to do for Rahmania, Talfala, and Salt River Muslim School. Mr. Saleh Burdin. Right, we're now dealing with on page 54. He was the son of Imam Abdul Rahman Burdin of Wynberg. He became secretary of the Yusufia Mosque in Wynberg, near the Wynberg railway station. The Yusufia Mosque property existence was due to a donation in 1930 from the estate of his grandfather Yusuf Raycliffe, son of Philip Raycliffe. Okay, Mr. Burdin was the chairman of the Cape Malay Association of Wynberg for 10 years, 1924 to 1934. He taught at Rahmania Primary School just before he was accepted as principal at Simonstown Muslim School. His T3 teaching certificate secured him that job. He came from a prominent, affluent, land-owning, well-respected family. He was known to have the public interest at heart. Saleh Burdin was a protege of Dr. Abdurrahman. While chairman of the Simonstown School, he was appointed as the chairman of the Cape Malay Association. He had the drive and zeal for the social advancement of his co-religionists. The establishment of Simonstown Muslim Primary School was for him a political statement. While Dr. Abdurrahman had the interests of the colored people in general at heart, Burdin seemed to have focused on the Malay community per se, with the exclusion of Indians and Christian colored interests. Davids was under the opinion, that is now Ahmad Davids, that Burdin aimed to seek political favor with Herzog National Party as a reaction to Dr. Abdurrahman's African People's Organization, sentiments which also promoted English, which was felt as if the needs of the Muslims were neglected. Ahmad Davids, Politics of the Muslims of the Cape, Volume 4, UCT, 1981, page 199. So here's a picture of Saleh Burdin. There he is. Okay. Yeah, right. Okay. Burdin's heart was set on building an Islam-oriented school in Wynberg as well. Davids, though, was also of the opinion that the Malay Association was more focused on its strong religious sentiments and not in politics. He sees the association as the support for the local clergy. The popular imams of that time was Imam Muhammad Shadli Awaldi and Sheikh Ahmad Bihadin, who were also members of the Malay Association. May Allah grant him Jannah, inshallah. You know, they went through hardship and they tried to do the best, and Allah knows best. Allah is the one who grants, and Allah is the one who takes away, and Allah is the one who forgives. The Cape Malay Association enjoyed almost undivided popularity and support from the Cape Muslims. Dr. Abdurrahman, on the other hand, seems to have influenced colored people in general to achieve more by way of education, trade, industrial efforts, and the buying of land. Van der Ross, page 32. These were for the doctor's steps to promote growth of the whole colored community. Our next one is Muhammadiyah Primary School. On Sunday, the 19th of October, 1924, the Cape Malay Association invited all Muslims, Malays, Indians, Arabs, etc., quote, to attend a Muslim public meeting, unquote, at the St. John's Hall off Wellington Road, Wynberg. The object of the meeting was to establish a school for the education of children of Mohammedan faith, unquote. The meeting resolved that the school is needed, that funds should be obtained by subscription, donations, and functions. The school should be built on purchased land. An elected committee of 12 shall govern the matters of the school, and that the committee shall be called the Muhammadiyah Muslim Joint Committee, unquote. This committee could not be established by Mr. Bearden. Mr. Bearden then went to establish the committee could not be established by Mr. Bearden. And Mr. Bearden then went on to establish the Muslim Educational Trust, which had the following goals set for it. 1. To undertake the control and administration of existing Muslim schools and other educational institutions, to establish other Muslim schools or Muslim educational institutions for primary, secondary, and higher education. On the 12th of July 1929, under the auspices of the trust, a mortgage bond of 5958 was raised with the school as collateral. Okay. The trust acquired land for the school building and proceeded to maintain the registration of the state's aid for the state's aid. Thus, the Muhammadiyah Muslim Primary School thus became a state-aided school in terms of Section 325 of the and 326 of the Ordinance Number 5, 1921. A court case was instituted against him by the Muhammadiyah's representative body, with no real success. It is believed that this move accelerated the establishment of Muhammadiyah, his resignation from Simonstown Muslim Primary School, and his appointment as principal of Muhammadiyah. Bearden's work leaned more to modernization of the Muslim community through formal education rather than by secularization in total. His vision can be seen in this extract. Haji Muhammad Salih Bearden is the principal of Muhammadiyah Muslim School in Batsaro. It is still there. I went to visit him the other day. Wynberg, and the founder of the society known as the Muslim Education Trust, which controls the school, which he established. Okay, I'm now on page 56. The aim of the society and that of the school is to uplift, improve, educate, and develop spiritually, mentally, physically, and extrinsically the youth of the country and guide them towards a goal of, quote, good and useful citizenship. Good in the sense of obedience to God, and useful in the sense of the service to humanity. The motto of the school institution was spiritual, mental, physical, and extrinsical development, the sun. Bearden, it's a quote, so there's an R in there, should be, okay, fine. So the motto of the both institutions, sick meaning there's a grammatical error. The motto is spiritually, mental, physical, and extrinsical development, the sun. Bearden placed a higher premium on character development and self-improvement as a first step to acceptance by the dominant class. Listen to this now, okay? Their rationale of dominance was based on, a priori, moral decency, quote, unquote, of non-white people in general and coloreds in particular, while Bearden focused on inherent decency of his Malay group. Dr. Abdurrahman focused on the birthright of the subjugated coloreds to citizenship, to be granted to them unconditionally. It's a nice way of putting the political features of two in this one paragraph. I think it gives one a good understanding of the aims and objectives of the different people. Politically, Bearden was opposed to Abdurrahman. This doctor's commitment was the empowerment of all the deprived in South Africa. According to Ahmad Davis, politics was the lost concern of Burden's Cape Malay Association, unquote. It had strong, narrow religious sentiments, promised concrete efforts to alleviate their social problems, and the support of local Muslim clergy, among them popular leaders Imam Shadli Awaldin and Sheikh Ahmad Bihadin. Burdin saw the Muslims as a distinct cultural collective with special needs. Burdin wanted Muhammadiyah to imbue the young Muslim with ethical commitment. Formal education was definitely excuse me excuse me formal education was definitely perceived as synonymous with promoting self-reliance and self-respect in people who still had to earn and prove they deserved the maximum benefits of citizenship. Abdurrahman was not sectarian like the Malay Association. Quote, he opposed color discrimination and segregation. He fought these matters where he believed the root lay, in political discrimination and in the withdrawal of full franchise from non-white people in the Cape. He saw with clear insight how the lack of political power would lead to discrimination in other spheres, in occupation, in wages, in education, in housing, and in social matters, unquote, Van der Ross. Dr. Abdurrahman knew that color discrimination was most pronounced and insidious in the area of public education, where the political socialization of the young was consciously perpetuated to segregate social order and perpetuate it. His 20 years of work between the disenfranchised generally and his profession made his detractors hold him to account for not reinforcing Muslim tradition. So this, you see the kind of difference of opinion and the different focus of the different people. Dr. Abdurrahman's long absence to address the plight of the Cape Indian community with the viceroy in India. This is interesting. He went away to India as a plea for the Indian community, and gave Burdin and his organization breathing space to consolidate the organization. It is also at that time that an official investigation was conducted into education problems of the colored people of the Cape. In 1925, two colored men, Dr. Abdurrahman and Mr. Hendricks, were appointed on the commission to inquire into colored education, Cape Times 5/11/1925. Dr. Abdurrahman's leaving for India was his apparent disregard for the commission's importance. In Abdurrahman's absence, Rahmania deteriorated. The Inspector of Education noted, Inspector Report 1925, overcrowding and vandalism in District 6 and the limitations of Dr. Abdurrahman's contributions are cited as reasons for the deterioration. The influence and absence of Dr. Abdurrahman was felt through the whole of the Cape because his advice was sought by all Cape Muslims. So there is a sign of when you have a leader and that in actual fact holds everything. So when he leaves and nobody else can do his work, everything falls to pieces. The Paarl Muslim Primary School. The patron-client relationship between Abdurrahman and the Paarl Muslim community found encouragement from the doctor to move away from the pure madrasa approach to the establishment of a state-aided school for Muslim children. The building was bought to use as a state-aided Muslim school under the Cape Provincial Administration from 1923. Or in 1923. A condition laid down was that no non-Muslim child was to be enrolled. Imam Kimi Hamildin, a full-time Arabic teacher, was provided and paid by the education department. Mr. Hafiz Latif was the first and only teacher, and he became the first principal when his assistant was added in 1929. So that is the Fal Muslim Primary School. Political client-patron relationship. Dr. Abdurrahman's involvement with the South African Indian Congress brought some discontent among the Cape Muslim community. By 1925, some disillusionment with the doctor as champion of Islam orientated schools was becoming uh, palpable. Palpable. But his unqualified commitment was no longer self-evident. The Cape Malay Association thus declared their aim to take over the existing schools and educational trusts in the Muslim community. Some Afrikaans-speaking Muslims began to sympathize with the growing Afrikaner political formation. With the election of the new government, 17 July 1924, the anti-Abdurrahman sentiments increased. 1 year later, the Cape Malay Association convened an historical conference in the Cape Town City Hall, hoping to hear the new government's education policy. It is one of the largest gatherings of Muslims in South Africa. Practically every sect and shade of many followers of Islam were present. Among those present was Dr. D.F. Malan, Minister of Education, former editor of the Burger, August 20th, June 1925. Only the intensive propaganda campaign with the able and eager assistance of a traditional Muslim leadership, the Imams, could have been so rewarded with attendance. Dr. Abdurrahman was significantly absent. Malan and W. Snow reinforced previous commitments to Malays. Reference was made of the Malays and the Afrikaans shared cultural identities. Malan expressed a recognition of the Muslim civilization and the parallel development of the civilization with that of the Europeans in the history of South Africa. Malan commended the Muslims for their sobriety, loyalty, and love of hard work and promised them opportunities to further encourage the growth of the Muslim community. The Muslims and Afrikaners shared language and was also resistant to English cultural imperialism. Malan was vague and made no specific statements of government to provide schools for the disenfranchised Muslim children. At this conference, the following educational resolution were made. Arabic must be the third language, not as a concession, but integral. The transfer of colored education from provincial to national and the introduction of night schools. Malan painted a picture of specific interest in addressing the educational challenges of the Cape Muslims. Mr. Hamid did not agree. Quote, I deem it, sir, a disgrace to our association, Malay, to have carried on in such a manner instead of discussing religion, social, and educational matters which vitally affect the life of our community. The Cape, August 20th June 1923. Malan's slogan at the conference were South Africa first and justice for all were questionable with the introduction of the Apprenticeship Act in 1926, which effectively excluded the Muslim craftsmen who were educationally not qualified. And this is the strategy of the governments at that time, setting up policies and certifications which will disqualify people who are crafty and who can do the work, and in this way exclude them from the economic market. So this certifications in education is a clear political strategy to ensure that only the elite will be able to achieve and to get those particular jobs. And here was a perfect thing that proves this point, how certifications and qualifications. That's why Professor Noam Chomsky says the academia are the gatekeepers of capitalism. It ensures and entrenches the class culture, and it ensures mass labor force, and ensures a political or a capitalistic managerial kind of class. Hamid called for compulsory education for coloreds, Cape Times, 9th of March 1926. Hamid feared the exclusion of Muslims from the economic life in higher categories of work. Only 11% of the colored children attended school, while 100% of the white children went to school under the Compulsory Schools Act. Even that act, making school compulsory for whites and then not compulsory for the masses, is also a strategy to ensure that top jobs are kept by the white fraternity. Hamid, in his address at the Malay Association annual conference on 27th of January 1927, called the whites extremists, cunts, and hypocrites, quote, unquote. This is the AL report of Proceedings, Colored European Conference, 1933, page 30. This statement ended the client-patron relationship between the Malay Association and the National Party. If the Muslims wanted progress, they now had to go it alone in the process of modernization. Okay. It's quite a challenge that they went through, and the interesting part, obviously, it all centers around education. When I have a chance, inshallah, I will give you the bolts, the nuts and bolts of how education, in actual fact, entrenches the capitalistic paradigm and entrenches political control of the elite over the masses. Hopefully, after I've done this particular book with you, inshallah. The White School Board Control. Okay, page 58. The Muslim community's application to establish a school in the hall in Pontak Street, District 6, was turned down. The school board only served state-funded schools beyond Standard 4. Mission schools must serve colored children, schooling up to Standard 4. Dr. Abdurrahman was aware that poverty is an effect of opportunities denied. In his address as guest speaker at the invitation of the African Methodist Episcopalian Church, AME, opening of 2 classrooms, the doctor reminded all that education was the concern of the state. Although colored people were of the poorest, they were expected to provide their own schooling. His experience in Scotland in his student days made him acutely aware of the plight of the poor in an industrialized world. Abdurrahman urged that education for the disenfranchised should be raised to Standard 6. The requirement to enter skills training programs. In the doctor's address to the AME Church, a striking blow for modernization of schooling was made, and the manifest advantage which the dominant class has orchestrated for themselves. Well, he does now, he puts it what I'm just telling you, but I feel what I'd like to do is to do the nuts and bolts of how is it possible. The coloreds had no direct voice in the disbursements of revenue for education. They had political impotence. Quote, that is a quote. Don Pinnock, 1980, Studies in the History of Cape Town, Volume 3, 1900 to 1950. The need for Muslims to fund their own education became the order of the new day of the time. Indian Muslim Relief Fund and the Muir Street Muslim School. I'm now on page 59. I'm hoping to finish this book tonight. Is it possible? I hope so, inshallah. Okay. The Indian Muslim Relief Fund and the Muir Street Muslim School. In 1923, the IMR Fund donated £200 to Dr. Abdurrahman towards the purchase of land and buildings in Scotches Kloof. woke up, and Scottish Club woke up for an Islamic-oriented educational facility. This fund emerged in 1918 during the influenza epidemic, when it provided welfare aid to affected indigent families, especially in District 6. £1,000 came from Transvaal and £600 from Natal. This was distributed to the needy, and the rest was used to start a school in Aspling Street, District 6, a kilometer away from Rahmania. Rahmania was unable to cope with the demand for admission, and its management was unable to build another classroom. Later, the fund, under the management of Mr. Halim, announced at a predominantly Indian audience its purchase of 2 houses in Pontak and Muir Street for the building of and establishment of the Muir Street Muslim School. Its financial needs were set at £5,000. So the Muslim business people came in with their money, and the Malays came in with their craft. And this is what made this, and the commonality was Islam, being Muslims. Within 1 year, January 1930, of the above meeting, the building was completed and the doors opened. Walaikum salam, baby. I'm reading, I'm doing hard work. Whisper, please. I'm recording. Oh, it's you. Yeah, assalamu alaikum. Just a little bit of fun inside of our recording. Okay, they just arrived now. Okay, within 1 year, January 1930, the above meeting, the building was completed, and the doors opened to the people of Lower District 6. The families that generously contributed were the Halims, Hans, Gul, Muhammad, Wali, Essa, Beg, Ibrahim, Patel, Ismail, Hussein, Parker, Japi, Khan, Qasim, Wajah, Qaida, Murat, Suleiman, Torat, Badruddin, and other anonymous donors. Mr. Philip Scotts, the most eligible of the time, was appointed as principal of Muir Street Muslim School. Can I just read this, my baby, please? I love you. Being doing a recording. Okay, can you switch it up? Go to that side for me, please, my baby. I love you. Okay, I'll be finishing off now because they just arrived now. Mr. Alim was the school's first manager. Oh, wait. Yeah, I'm here. Mr. Philip Scotts, the most eligible of the time, was appointed as principal of Muir Street Muslim School. He was the stepfather of Dr. Abdurrahman's deceased brother's children. Mr. Halim was the school's first manager. He secured the services of Sheikh Abdullah Bihadin. I'm doing hard work. Just hold on. Give me just read this. Be quiet, please. Mr. Halim was the school first manager. He secured the services of Sheikh Abdullah Bihadin as the Arabic teacher, whose duties included accompanying the boys to Jum'ah at the Islam Mosque in Muir Street. Mr. Abdullah Adams was the academic for the school when the school opened its doors for the first time. Most of the committee members were members of the Muir Street Mosque Committee. I'll have to stop at this point. This is page number 59, and then we will get to the Scottish Club Primary School. Interesting. Alhamdulillah. Shukran. Sorry about the last part, but it's part of the liveliness of what I'm trying to do. Okay. All the best. Assalamu alaikum.